All right, let's bring in Jamie McLennan for one last chat. He was obviously on TSN yesterday, and Bob MacKenzie officially calling it quits. We had Bob as our Friday guest for like 10 years.
Mr. Worldwide.
Mr. Worldwide. We loved him because he loved Pitbull. And what was that like there yesterday? What was that vibe like? It looked like a cool moment, but had to be a little bit sad too, I think.
It was, because it's an end of an era. You know, Bobby McKenzie is an absolute legend. And it's nice when the whole, we'll call it the whole hockey world, kind of reached out. And, you know, regardless of what side of the fence you're on, whether on Sportsnet or TSN or every other platform, there was a lot of love being given to Bobby Mack, and rightfully so. You know, he's the original insider. You know, I'm as good of friends as I am with Darren Dreger and Pierre LeBrun and Chris Johnston and, you know, Elliot Friedman and all of them. You know, Bobby Mack paved the way for them. So it was pretty impressive. Little bit sad, but also, you know, the way he handled it was just the way he handles life, with incredible grace and class. And it was probably the highlight of the day, I'll be honest, because we sat there for 6 hours like idiots, just talking about bit pieces and yelling and screaming about, I don't know, Olympic goaltending and you name it. There was, you know, there wasn't a lot to talk about, but I kind of feel like, you know, this year, the free agent class was a little leaner. Everybody kept their players for the most part. And then, you know, I think you're still going to see a lot of trades, and you are going to see some players that maybe fall through the cracks that you can get for pennies on the dollar in August type of thing. So, you know, I think a lot of teams stood pat and are going to be able to be rewarded later in the summer and even early into the season.
Jamie McLennan with us on the show this morning. If you're watching over on YouTube, please sub to the channel. Noodles, let's get to the headline here in Edmonton. You guys didn't even get to talk about it because it didn't happen until last night. So we're getting a fresh take from Jamie McLennan
fresh bread
on the show this morning. Mangiapane obviously spent a lot of time in Calgary, was in Washington last year, only played about 13 minutes, had 14 goals, didn't even shoot the puck 100 times. So they get him, I think, a reasonable number in a reasonable term. But what type of player are they getting, and how do you think he fits in?
Well, I think, you know, when you lose a guy like Connor Brown, who was your penalty kill. Now, listen, your penalty kill was really inconsistent last year. Mangiapane can kill penalties. The one thing you got with him is you got younger, you got faster, and he is a pest, so he is hard to play against. And yes, 1 year, so it might be an outlier year, he did score 35. Now, he scored 35 when he was playing higher in the lineup. So do you give him an opportunity to play higher in the lineup and maybe get some offensive looks? But the other thing that comes with this, and this is what I keep saying too, is he's a smart player. I think that's one of the things when you need to continue to add to this group in Edmonton is you need high IQ players who can think the game, who can adapt to their environment. And that's what Mangiapane is. So it's not a bad signing in any way you look at it. I thought it was a quality signing. His analytics are solid. You know, to me, there's no downside to this. If anything, there's upside, because if he finds some more ice time and finds some chemistry, even with a guy like Draisaitl or even on a third line, he's gonna produce and be a nice fit for the Oilers. So I thought it was a value signing. Would I like to see them add one more player up there? Absolutely. I keep circling. You know, the problem that I have, guys, is there's not any teams that are, you know, defined sellers right now. We're rebuilding and you know, come get the players. The only team I can think of is Pittsburgh. And everybody, would I love to have Brian Rust? Absolutely. Would I like to have Ricard Raquel? You know, either one of those players would fit in because they have term and they don't make a king's ransom. They make around $5 million. So you can start moving deck chairs around and make the money fit even after this Mangiapane signing. You know, is Max Jones going to make the team? There's $1 million you could put in the minors if you had to. You know, guys like that, you're going to find
you could trade Henrique.
Yes.
I mean, he's got a no movement clause, so we need to clear it. But I mean, that's some money that could go back if you're looking for a bride. Like, that's where you could sort of make it work, right?
Well, if you add depth, then you could literally have McDavid, Draisaitl, RNH down the middle. and then you go Noah Phillip or Philp. Is it Philp or Phillip?
It's Philp. Philp.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
Philp.
no second
there's no
I.
extra I. There's no extra I after the L there. So it's Philp. I was yammering away yesterday and I'm like, did I spell this wrong or is it just, it's Philp. So the other thing too that needs to be pointed out is, and in watching even, Stan Bowman's presser, I think they want to give some runway to Savoy. I think they want to give some runway to Philp. I think they also want to try this Tomasek guy who, has never played an NHL game from my research and is 29 years old. So can you have somebody in there push for a spot on a value contract that we aren't talking about? Maybe it's not the sexiest of acquisitions, but it's either in-house guys that push through and challenge for a spot. So those are the three guys that I circle that I do believe that they want to give some runway to, so you don't go out and jam up your roster right away. You give them some runway to see if they can fit into your system. Excuse me.
Yeah, and if they do, then like right now, I don't like what they got 1.7 in cap space. I don't hate the idea of getting to a trade deadline and we're not sitting here going, it has to be money in, money out. It has to be money in, money out. Like it would be, that is the best way to approach it. You see what Philip can do. You see if Tomasek can play in the NHL. By the way, for everybody, I did tweet out every single goal he scored in the SHL last year. So if you want to go find that from my Twitter account from yesterday. But yeah, if those guys pan out, then you can use that little bit of cap space to address an area that kind of hasn't developed.
Well, and as you mentioned too, I think they'll start the season being patient and seeing what they have. And then what you do is by the 20 game mark, we'll call it, US Thanksgiving, there will be maybe a team or two that wants to move some players out. And that might, I know it sounds crazy, but that's maybe where they'll be looking for a goaltender difference. I don't think it's going to be this summer. Unless something happens that a goaltender that you covet is available, I think you look at it and you go, we're probably going to start the season with these two because they make 3.6 total. And we'll see if Skinner can improve. Are you looking at the coaching situation? I'm not sure if you talk much about that, but I think all of their contracts are up. Does Paul Coffey go back into the press box, into senior management? Do they bring in a traditional, defensive coach to help this group with their systematic play? You have to replace Glenn Gulletson. So is there going to be a power play specialist that comes in and has a refreshing look for this power play? I think coaching is just as important as roster construction this year, because when I look at it, I think these coaches did a fantastic job. Don't get me wrong. I think Chris Knobloch did a great job, but I also think there's growth there. And what I mean by that is when I watched Florida, they were like a machine. And I watched them practice, game 6 in Florida. I watched them practice throughout the year, talk to that coaching staff. They are buttoned up. And when I talked to Seth Jones, now this might sting a little bit, but we talked to him on the ice after they won the cup. And he said, when I was acquired, I did weeks and weeks and hours of video with the coaching staff to acclimate myself to the Florida Panthers, to the style they want us to play, to the details they want us to play. And all I could think about is, do the Edmonton Oilers do video like that? Do these players, are they, relentless in the video room? Are they relentless? Connor McDavid is a creature of habit, I believe. I think he's a guy who is relentless in the gym. He's relentless in his preparation. Is there another level for a coaching staff? Is there another level for details for this team so that if there is a breakdown, it's like, this is what we do. This is what we do on these plays. And, to me, I felt like the Oilers still had a little looseness to their game when it was critical. And the elephant in the room is they were unable to break Florida's system.
Yeah.
And McDavid talked about running your head up against the wall and the layers that they had. A lot of that is details and figuring out how to break yet another team's system. So I think there's a lot of growth here internally for players, but also for the coaching staff. It's a big offseason to make this team better in every facet, not just on the ice, but off the ice too.
Maybe, and can you share your thoughts, I guess, on expectation today? Obviously, there's no trophy handed out for free agency, although maybe the Bob MacKenzie,
that would be a nice sort of Bob MacKenzie
whoever spends the most or whatever,
day winner. Yeah,
you get a
that's
trophy or
good
something. But so obviously nothing's won yet, and it. When you see Vegases of the world going out and landing, I say peering over your neighbor's fence and you're seeing other teams, it can be frustrating for this market. Of course, we all know that there might be a bit more money freed up next offseason, but I guess fair expectation right now as it stands with this Oilers group. And I know you mentioned that nothing changed in goaltending. That could get addressed later on. There could be something else that happens down the line. But in terms of the West right now, where do you see the Oilers fitting in with what they have at this moment?
Well, I think health is the biggest thing. If you get a healthy Hyman back, you get, I think Trent Frederick is a guy who's interesting because I want to see him healthy.
Yeah.
Is he the replacement for Evander Kane, or is he farther down? Maybe Mangiapane gets a little look up there type of thing. That's the biggest thing that I look at is, again, what is Tomasek? Is he a European guy that's not going to be able to adjust? Is Savoy, with his size, going to be able to handle the rigors of the West, going into Vegas on the road and having a tough matchup where, they've got trees back there for defensemen. Those aren't shrubs. So, I think those are the multi-million-dollar questions that we have right now. I know Oilers fans are probably frustrated going, hey, they got worse. They got worse yesterday technically because Perry goes somewhere else and they trade Arvidsson. So their depth is definitely challenged. Jeff Skinner walks out the door. Who else am I missing? There's 5 players that I felt that are gone.
Perry, Brown, Skinner,
Kane,
Arvidsson,
from
Kane.
earlier, I guess.
Yeah, that would be the 5,
and Kane. So there's 5 players that help to the depth of your group. And you know what? We only talked about depth when they didn't have it against the Florida Panthers, but they certainly had it against Dallas. They certainly had it against LA and Vegas. So, these are the things that you're going to have to address. But as I tell people, if they started the season with that roster, they'd still be fine. Now, is that a cup winning roster? I don't know. I don't think so. But I think what they need to do is continue to add to this group, and it is a moving target. Stan Bowman didn't have to submit his final list tomorrow and say, hey, we're playing in the Stanley Cup, on Thursday type of thing. So, there's a long road for them. Everybody and every one of my friends that reached out yesterday from Edmonton, I used one word: patience. And you have to give them the opportunity to have this patience. Yes, would you have liked a shiny toy? Would Nikolai Ehlers dropping into your lap and a value contract going, hey, I want to go to Edmonton and try and win? Yeah, would that be awesome? I don't think that's around the corner. It sounds like he wants to play south of the border.
Yeah, somewhere warm.
And not have a light shined on them. So yeah, somewhere warm, as warm as it's been in Edmonton, and I was there last week. That's not the warm climate I think Ehlers is looking for. So I think it's more, you're looking at the Pittsburghs. Can you find a trade for Raquel or Rust? I think you look at another team if they drop out. I don't know. Again, I'm just getting crazy. If Nashville doesn't have a great start, do you start looking at, Marchessault? Could Marchessault be a fit or somebody like that? If St. Louis, who's made some moves, if they've got players available, if they feel like they drop out, does Columbus, you look at, I think Elvis Merzlikins needs a fresh start. So he makes $5.4 million. Is there a trade there at some point where it could go Skinner for Merzlikins and Columbus has to eat that salary to make it the same amount of money that Skinner makes? These are the types of creative things that you have to start thinking about, but you don't have to do them today or tomorrow. I think it comes with osmosis of what you see your team shaping up. Keep in mind, they still have the 2 best players in the world.
Yeah.
And you've got, Hyman, who, he had a down year last year, Zach Hyman, by his standards. So is he going to hit the ground running? I think RNH didn't have his best regular season as well. So, you look at some of this group, they've still got the spine of a very good team. It's just they still need to add to it. And I'm not challenging that thought process.
Noodles, as always, man, great insight. We appreciate it. Thank you very much for hopping on today. And I guess we'll catch up in mid-late September sometime.
I guarantee you the team might look a little different, but it might not. That's the crazy thing.
You're going to join us mid-September. Are going to be like, so they haven't added anyone since we chatted with you last.
Other than this, mark my words, there'll be a PTO or two that you go, that guy could be a difference maker. And, I look at the Toronto Maple Leafs got Max Pacioretty last year on a value deal. He came in and health was the biggest challenge. You might, Vegas got Brandon Saad, who got bought out, and then they got him for pennies on the dollar. There's good players still out there. What it is they all believe they're still going to make $2 to $3 million. What they might be making is $775 and be a really good player for a team that, could use you. So I think there is still a PTO market that teams with patience are going to find some pretty darn good players.
We hadn't even talked about the PTO market.
Hang on, man.
That's a real bright spot.
Last thing, too. Vancouver's starting goaltender last year was Kevin Lankinen. He didn't have a job in early September. All of a sudden, he's got a 4 or 5 year extension for Vancouver, and he played very well for them. So there are pieces out there that guys can contribute. They just believe they're going to make more money right now. And if the market's not there for them, they go, okay, to hell with it. I'm going to go on a 1 year deal to Edmonton and see if I can, win or see if I can do something. So you might get some value players there because of what you've built. It's the old field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. Last year it was Arvidsson, it was Skinner, and guys like that was like, I want to go play with McDavid. It didn't work out. You're going to have other players that are going to want to do that as well.
Great stuff, man. Always looking at the bright side. That's why we love you, Noodles. You have a good summer, buddy, and we'll catch up again soon.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
There you go. Soon. That's Jamie McLennan.
He's spot on, though.
He's going to go hide for a couple of months and then get back on overdrive.
McLennan on a PTO. Oilers goaltending issues.
You know what, though? I mean, he's right about the PTO.
He serves the suspension.
This is like the people they're not going to want to hear this today, but it's like the NBA buyout window. Like when a bunch of guys just pop up out of nowhere, that happens like right before after the trade deadline. It's like you can still sign these guys. So